Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome once again to the Sikh Youth Show. With me I have my regular fellow Veers, Bhai Sahib Manmohan Singh and Bhai Sahib Tasveer Singh, both from East London and Sevadars of Gurdwara Singh Sabha, London East. I'd like to start the show off with first mentioning the great immense pride that we have for Bhai Jatinderpal Singh Bhullar, who is actually the first guardsman to be wearing a turban. Now this image has gone up nationally today. I was on the train today, this is the Evening Standard, and I was on the train earlier on today, and it was great to see this image of one of our Singhs in at the start, Sabit Surat, and standing in such a prestigious position. And to be honest with you, well, we're going to be biased anyway, but he looks so much more better than the than the soldier next to him in the bearskin hat. But it's such a great achievement for us to have a Singh in this position, and I can only reiterate that we're very proud of you. So to the family of Bhai Jatinder Singh Bhullar and all his relatives, we congratulate you all, and we congratulate the Sikh community in the UK on such a great achievement. The topic of the show we're going to discuss today is going to be based around humanitarianism. Basically, what I want to discuss, or what I want to put through to my fellow Veers, is we have this focus within the Sikh community. We focus on our spiritualism. We focus on our, we're focusing on our political side. Mm-hmm. There's no denying we've got focus on commerce and business. Academia as well. Sikh community is well focused upon that as well. So we've got some good wins here, and this is certainly another great success story for us. That we do have Sabit Surat Sikhs in the British Armed Forces, in the police, like yourself, Bhai Manmohan Singh, and in other positions, be it within commerce or within support industries as well. But what there seems to be a lack of, maybe it's a personal opinion of mine, is our work and our contribution to humanitarianism or humanitarian projects. That's not to say that we don't have sanstars and organizations that are carrying out this, such as Khalsa Aid, SOPW, Seva 84, and not forgetting some of the great Gursikhs that have lived, such as Bhagat Puran Singh in the last decade or 2 decades or so. But certainly, on a common platform, on a common ground, I seem to think that there is a gap there that we don't seem to be filling out. When I meet people of a Christian background, I certainly see them being more involved in humanitarian projects, be it abroad or be it also in the UK. And certainly often look at them and I think, they do have a better understanding of Guru Nanak Dev Ji's Sikhi than we do. Maybe I'm reading the wrong signals, maybe I'm understanding the wrong things, but if I can put that question forward onto you guys, maybe we can look back at how the Gurus dealt with humanitarianism, how they introduced it, how they focused upon it. So, Manmohan?
I think you touched on a very valuable point, that how does our community view humanitarian work? How do we actually see that? I mean, the prime example is we have no organizations, but they tend to do a lot of humanitarian work in abroad countries which are obviously not directly here. Mm-hmm. What we're seeing is that here locally, there are local issues that require humanitarian help as well. But we somehow don't see it, or we don't see it on the same level as maybe in Africa or in India, where there is poverty on a greater level. But we were discussing earlier, I think there is still need for humanitarian work, but maybe the kind of work we need to give is different. Maybe it's not so much food related or clothes related. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's more mental, mental health. Because humanitarian level works on many levels, And I think we've always focused on food and clothing and the external well-being on more so, but we always neglected maybe the internal well-being of the person. Because I think when Guru Nanak Dev Ji's philosophy was, I think the idea was, look, take care of the person's external needs and then work on the internal needs. And if you look at, you just mentioned, yes, a lot of the Christian charities, but if you really look at, they mostly work on the external. And then they introduce religion as a backdrop. That is always their main intention, but they always first look at the external needs. For example, in Africa, they look after the food, the schoolings, making wells, making electricity supplies, and then slowly they begin to then bring in a church and bring in the spiritual help as well. Because I think they realized something which we haven't really taken idea from. Look, you need both. You need the physical stability and you need the spiritual strength to continue with.
And they're able to, suppose, do it on a mass scale because they have a Sanstha or an organization behind them. Whereas you look at the individuals, I mean, Khalsa Aid have done similar projects, but it's close to a very active group of people, but certainly they haven't had full Panthic support, just like at SOPW and Seva 84 and other charities that I can think of in United Sikhs.
I mean, mainly if you look at those organizations, Christian organizations, they've been very good. They've actually had a forward-looking outlook of what they're thinking what we're going to do for the next 10 years. I think
maybe even beyond that.
Yeah, and maybe even beyond that. I think some of our organizations, most of our charities now, Sikh-related charities, are very forward-thinking. But previously, I think maybe a lot of our focus has been put onto putting money into, for example, into our gurdwaras, into those organizations. So people are just used to actually giving money. People aren't used to actually in the Hatti Seva as well. And that's, I think, something which needs to be reintroduced in that, there can be organizations out there which have so much money, but if they don't have the volunteers as well, then they can't go forward. So then, money is not the issue for them. It's actually the volunteers who have to really put themselves forward as well.
Let's take some steps back and let's look at the times of the Gurus. So we look at Guru Nanak Dev Ji. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji brings in equality, brings in the concept of welfare, brings in the concept of reform. I think there's no better example than Sajjan Thug, as he was known, or Goda Rakshish, who perhaps were individuals who would have been
outcasts of society almost.
Yeah, exactly, outcasts of society, written off by society. I mean, if you want to really realistically classify what Sajjan Thug was, Sajjan Thug was a serial killer, a murderer. So whilst most of us would say lock the person up, throw away the key, Guru Nanak Dev Ji introduced him to a form of reform.
It's like modern time of rehabilitation.
Exactly.
Which I think sometimes we have a very rigid outlook, and I think sometimes it's the stiff upper lip of the British which we've taken upon ourselves, where we don't actually look at the problem behind the actual person. And I think the Gurus had an insight. Look, behind every action, there's a thought process, and if you tap into the thought process, you can then find a solution to it. And I think what we're not doing today, like that's a very good thing. Humanitarian work requires time, your time. It requires you to maybe, and that might be a sacrifice of your children, maybe less time with the missus, maybe less time with your social activity which you may enjoy doing. But humanitarian work requires your time and your compassion. Giving time on its own doesn't mean nothing. If you're giving your time but still not engaging, then what's the point of that?
Well, what is the point then? What is the point of humanitarian? What is it? Does it build our character up? Does it?
It's twofold. I think through humanitarian work, not only you're helping the other person to pick up themselves, making them spiritually stronger, you're actually also making yourself stronger as well. You're actually learning from them about certain skills that you never knew you had. And then by developing those skills, then you're able to go out further and help more people out. I mean, if you look at the Gurus, they spend a lot of their time not inside their homes, but actually outside, going into these civilizations which are so backward and doing humanitarian work. Boli Sahib Gurdwara. If you look at the Gurus built, 3 Gurdwara in their time? Darbar Sahib, Amritsar, Tarantan Sahib, Govindwal Sahib and Khadur Sahib. That's where the Gurus actually live. Govindwal Sahib was built on a humanitarian level. There's no water, so the bolis were made. Tarantan Sahib, so all of the Gurus' project were humanitarian. Yep. And then those humanitarian projects one day became political threats. If I don't want to go too much into it, just quickly, even if we look at the Nantpur Damata talking about the rights of the Sikh rivers, which have been diverted, Satluj and Byasa, which have been diverted towards Haryana and other states, that water which was coming into Punjab's fields has been now diverted. The Punjab's dhartis, the water tables have now been unbalanced. The water inside Punjab is dirty and filthy. You can't drink that water without having filters. And humanitarian aid, the Sant took upon himself, look, this is a humanitarian crisis. If the water table carries on depleting, that is going to grow.
And you're talking about, when you mean Sant, you're talking about Sant Janel Singh, and you're talking about Sant Janel Singh Bhindrawali, and you're talking about the Gursikhs of the time, of that era.
You understood, look, this humanitarian need, which they saw the foresight, look, Jay Hundaria, Kumadavich Pani is dropping, the water levels are dropping, people are using more fertilizer, more insecticides, making the fossil more poisonous. And obviously now the cancer rates in Punjab are horrendous. Why? Because they're not getting fresh water. And what is food? That is a basic need for humans to exist, for humanitarian concept to exist.
I mean, the worry is that Punjab might actually be a desert in the next 20 years.
If it carries on the way it is, NATO is it? Or one of the have written a report, we're discussing a couple of other things, if it carries on the way it is, it's going to obviously become desert-like conditions. But coming back to the point is, it was a humanitarian issue. And the Sikhs had the foresight to look, if we don't deal with it now, in 20, 30 years' time, look what's going to happen. So I think humanitarian issues are the core to the Sikh concept. But who does them? If you look at now, who's doing them?
I mean, it's now going a few steps forward now when you're talking about contributing. It's like we've got used to putting money in that golak. And it's almost now developed into a direct debit, get your monthly direct debit going and have that comfort, which I'm not saying, I'm not undermining any of that. That's important seva, because with that seva, the established charities are able to go and do real seva.
If they're able to create that infrastructure, as I was saying, we can just, we can end up taking on these direct debits, but we don't really know what to do with it from there onwards. So they have to really think about it. So like what we're saying, all these issues which we've spoken about, it's all about foresight. So humanitarianism, we have to think what's going to happen in the next 10 years. How will our community be affected? How will the world be affected? So what do we do now in order to mitigate that?
I mean, I think one thing we've got to think about humanitarianism as well. I don't think you can say it's the word humans in there anyway. So you can't really say it's specific to one community.
No, I mean,
I think sometimes we do focus on the community, the fayda kiya. And I think another thing we need to snap out of is it isn't all about that.
No.
It is impartial. Humanitarianism is impartial to all. And certainly if we're going to do that seva, we need to go out there and feel impartial. Everyone's got the right to welfare, to support, whatever we can provide. And I think the sanctuary of the Gurdwara, the Guru's Dwara, the door to the Guru, that sanctuary is often just being...
the Guru's Langar, like you said, that is a basic need for one's human survival, is the biggest humanitarian seva one can do. It's a very big thing to do. You touched on a very nice point in terms of humans. Today's human is a consumer. And if we are to get youths involved in more humanitarian work, be it through charities or whatever, you've got to engage with that consumer on a human level now. And what I'm finding is, you might find as well, when you hear an average, couple of people talking in a conversation, what they're talking about. They're talking about the latest product, the iPhone, the iPads, or the latest fashion, or the latest celebrities, or what book they're reading, or what movie they've watched. It's all very cosmetic. Yep. And it's almost, the average person is so brainwashed in this whole cosmetic and this whole kind of fluffed up world that they're losing sight of the human things which are going on in other countries, or even in their own country, and they're unaware of it. I can tell you there were people living in Africa and India who will not be aware of the poverty in their own countries because they're so fluffed up in this whole area.
Which tends to happen.
Of course it does.
It always happens in those kind of countries.
So we've got the first core element is to bring that consumer off the consumer table, bring it to a human level again, and begin to engage on a human level.
It's almost like we're trying to get humble again.
Look at Buddha. Who could be a better example than Buddha? Lived in his palaces, never knew anything about it. And then one day he realized there's a concept of death, illness, disease, and happiness. And that made him human. And I think maybe the whole idea of Sikhi or any Dharam is to make you feel human.
Bring it back to a humble level again. It's all like you're talking about materialism. We talk about Maya really, you know, and we know how Maya crops up in Gurbani, and how Guruji really does talk about, you know, how Maya can be a threat in that respect.
Clouds your
judgment, clouds your judgment and your understanding, and your
the view of being ignorant. I mean, a lot of us do feel, you know, ignorance is a bliss sort of thing. So you just end up switching
comfort
off.
zone.
Yeah, comfort zone. You switch. I mean, like consumerism as well. I mean, you can flick the channel. You know, you can see something sad, but then you can flick to something happy.
It's true.
You know, and that's literally that's it. So your mind automatically, you know, you can give something to entertain your mind all the time.
Yeah,
But it literally is the realization that, you know, there is pain out there, there is suffering out there. That realization, like what we're saying, is something which you know.
And that's what's human.
Yeah.
The realization there's suffering out there.
Yeah.
And when you are able to connect to that suffering,
Yeah.
that is when you're becoming human.
Yeah.
In this present day and age, we are cutting ourselves off from our emotions. If you look at what's happening in the biggest thing, we are cutting ourselves off from any emotion, and hence we're feeling almost robotic.
Yeah.
It's because we're used to seeing it, because we see it on TV, because you don't see it firsthand as well.
No.
And you see certain suffering on TV, you've conditioned yourself to ignore that and walk over it. I mean, I want to take some steps back and let's go and talk about the gurus now again,
Yeah.
and talk about their acts of humanitarianism. And, you know, certainly one that springs to mind is Guru Har Krishan Sahib. You know, that amazing seva in Bangla Sahib, or in Delhi at the time, which was a smallpox epidemic.
Yeah.
No different from the plagues that were taking place here in the UK. I mean, we all study the plagues of the UK, the Black Deaths, and the plagues that took place in London that wiped out cities. And certainly the plague of Delhi was no different. I mean,
No, I was saying, yeah. I mean, it was really intense. I mean, when Guruji came to, you know, Bangla Sahib at that time, Bangla Sahib obviously was centered around. It wasn't specifically Bangla Sahib Gurdwara, but it was the house which he came to stay in at that time. It was centered around this epidemic. So when Guruji came, he was the savior basically for these people. They had suffered at the end of the day. Aurangzeb was the emperor at the time. He wouldn't have really cared for these individuals. The support they were getting, you know, they were literally left there to die for themselves.
I mean, the rich
really.
were probably running away from the epidemic anyway, so they had holiday homes.
Yeah,
living here in London.
No, that's how. I mean, again, you can bring parallels to the Great Plague of London. You know, we know at that time that a lot of the rich left and just basically left the poor to suffer as bad. So when Guru Har Krishan Sahib Ji came there, I mean, what did he introduce? I mean, let's first remember he was, you know, how old would he have been? You know, probably the age of 6. You know, would have been around the age of 6. So what would he have introduced? He would have introduced like a clinic. He would have that. You know, we look at Bangla Sahib now. We just think all they do is just matha take, and you know, we see Rara Sahib coming from there on TV. But Bangla Sahib at that time, it was the savior. What was going on there was saving Delhi from further pain, which it was going through at that point. People were being reformed.
What is smallpox? Do you know?
Smallpox is basically is quite an intense illness. I mean, what actually happens? You start getting very, very painful pimples on your face, and then from there, those pimples start growing within your internal organs, and then it basically brings everything to a standstill. So as a death, it's probably one of the most painful deaths.
I remember having chickenpox as a child. I remember the kids having chickenpox as well, and they don't look good.
Yeah.
And I meant smallpox. I mean, the person would look pretty scary.
Well, if somebody suffered smallpox at a young age, they would be left with those scars for the rest of their life. I mean, that's how bad. And so those are the kind of, you know, it was that, I mean, this kind of institute, which, you know, Bangla Sahib, Guru Har Krishan Sahib Ji, at the end of the day, he created, he blessed that lake which was near Bangla Sahib Gurdwara, which was near Bangla Sahib, which we call the Gurdwara now. He blessed that lake, which brought the smallpox epidemics to an end. So when we do go to Bangla Sahib, we should really, you know, it's not just another Gurdwara. You know, it's something which really changed the face of the world.
Let's look at the result of this. Guru Har Krishan Sahib got smallpox himself through this seva. So not only was he doing humanitarian seva, not only was he showing the Sikh by example, but it's a form of, you know, people may disagree with me, but can we classify that as a shahidi? Because in a way, Guru Har Krishan Sahib showed us a sacrifice of humanitarian aid. If you need to give humanitarian aid, if it means the threat of you catching that epidemic, then that should not be a barrier to you doing that seva. And certainly I can't think of a far greater example anywhere in the world, in any world history than Guru Har Krishan Sahib. And I think we don't talk about that as much as we should.
Quite ironically, the same Pasha, when it comes to Guru Har Krishan Ji, he stops. You know, when we read the Ardas, and he doesn't just write Guru Har Krishan Ji, he actually puts a slok, or like an introduction. He did it to Sabd Khujai. Maharaj felt that Guru Har Krishan Ji's act deserved recognition. So in obviously when conforming that Shabad, he obviously made that precedent. You know?
But then he also highlighted by saying sab dukh, meaning that it wasn't only just the bodily pains, you know, there were spiritual pains, everything,
emotional
pains, all that kind of stuff.
If you look at pain, from physical, it will go, eventually it will affect your spirit, or from spirit, it will affect your body. They're always interacting. I think one of the beauties, I think when you talk about the Gurus, is the Gurus always looked around them. Okay, what needs to be done? If you look at any Gurus, none of the Gurus were isolated within a dera or isolated within a confinement. The Gurus are very active. They went out to look for problems, and they look out to solve them as well. All of the Gurus were very active in their lives with the idea we're going to find a solution. And you can only find a solution once you're hands-on. All the Gurus were hands-on. Hence, Guru Har Krishan Ji khud the apne smallpox. The Gurus were, they had an amazing spirit. Obviously, Rab the Roops again, but they actually lived on a human level to show to us, look, this is how to live, this is how to give. And I think all the Gurus, whatever era they were born, whatever they did within their time, was all based upon Sarvadapala.
I think they had to show that empowerment as well, because it was going to be a panth at the end of the day. It was going to be a Guru Panth system. So in order to show that these things can be achieved through human means, through acts of humans, the Gurus had to show that. Guru Har Krishan Sahib could have done the miracle. Guru Nanak Dev Ji could have done the miracles. They could have been physical miracles in that respect anyway, but they showed a Hathi Seva approach to alleviating
because
that
that's
kind
what
of
brings the change. A quick fix doesn't fix anything at the end of the day. But a long, if you bring the change in, the change takes time, but that change didn't last for long.
In this day and age then, we've wiped out most of the old world epidemics. They come up and they will come again. So we use the word lormand, person who's in need, in dire need. So you had leprosy at the times of the Gurus. Guru Amar Das Ji, worked on that. Leprosy corners. We had smallpox. There's a Guru Har Rai Sahib who had clinics and developed the sort of hospital system.
Hospital systems,
so you had all of that. So now, as time's gone on, advances of medicine and technology, we've alleviated some of those rogues. But there's still rogues, of spiritual rogues, mental rogues, and certainly in this day and age, and I think we're underrating this, is the rogue or the illness of addictions. Certainly alcoholism, certainly drug abuse, which there's no sweeping this under the carpet. It's rife within the world, and it's rife within our community as a Sikh community. And we see it firsthand. We see the effects of alcoholism. We see the effects of drug abuse that's coming into it. We see the effects of depression, mental health issues. Perhaps they did exist before, but perhaps people had more going on in their life.
They're enhanced by the drug use, by the alcohol use. If someone's depressed, if they drink an alcohol, which is an antidepressant anyway, it makes even more,
it's a catalyst. It's a catalyst. Yeah.
So I think you're very rightly saying maybe today's Lord or maybe today's person that needs help is of a different kind, but the humanitarian help that may require is of different nature, but it still is needed.
Hence, I think sometimes the distance, ultimately, when you think humanitarian aid, you think of the third world, you think of Ethiopia, you think of African countries or India, and then you think on my own doorstep, is there any poverty, is there any need for humanitarian aid? Now, certainly, the reason why we're doing this discussion is that just to mention this to the Sangat, the Sangat of Gurdwara Singh Sabha London East, 7 Kings, have started a homeless shelter with the support of the committee of Singh Sabha London East, which has started on Monday. And this homeless shelter is a night shelter that's going to be operated during the winter months through the night, and will provide shelter for the homeless, for the people that are sleeping on the streets. particularly concerned in our area of Redbridge, where we do have a significant number of Punjabi rough sleepers in the region. This is not an exaggeration. We've been doing this seva now for over a year. We did this seva last year as well. This year we're taking a stronger approach in the sense that we're working in partnership with organizations such as Salvation Army, who we're also supporting in their night shelter. We've got an organization called Ramfel, which is a refugee and migrant forum for East London, so they're supporting as well as other organizations such as Sikh Welfare Society, an East London group of businessmen who our concern is that there are a significant number of Sikh or Punjabi rough sleepers, and we say 50% of rough sleepers in the Redbridge area are Sikh.
All the facilities, you shouldn't be no reason why you're sleeping on the streets. But we need to highlight that specifically the Punjabi community, the Punjabi people who are sleeping on the streets, they don't have these facilities. They don't have access to any kind of dole, or they won't have access to any kind of social security, housing benefits, any kind of facility which a council will provide. These people will not get it. So literally, you know, if they don't get the support, you know, which a normal homeless person is able to get, then, you know,
they would die.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is
They're
the
stuck,
situation.
actually. You know,
Let's take a few steps back in this.
If we talk about this particular seva, a lot of these people who are on the streets, they're actually stuck. Like I said, have no access to public funding.
Do you want to explain how often people think it's a self-architected or self-manufactured problem here. They've come to England. Well, how have they ended up on the streets?
To be quite honest with you, we all, our parents came into England to make money, to have a better lifestyle. Obviously, these guys are seeing that in Punjab there's no future for them, so they'll come abroad like our parents did back then. Come from this country to find a better life, to make a better economical status for themselves. What they found is, since the economic crisis has happened, they have fallen out of the labour market, because a lot of these boys, who are obviously the illegal migrants, they've fallen out of labour work, which is not available anymore, plus the competition from the Eastern Europeans. So what's happened is, where they used to get paid £40 a day for their labour, which is exploitation anyway, and that's even dropped down to £20 for some of them. And they're finding now, in these particular winter months where there's not much work anyway, they find themselves hard to pay for a room. And in those London areas, you're paying at least £60–70 a small room. Right? So these guys, then, not having the backup of work, not having much financial money here, have ended up on the street. And secondly, some of these guys don't have a back or a big family support structure in this country either. Some of those who did, they still get some help, but those who haven't, they've obviously found that friends and family are very short and far to help them, and they've obviously ended up on the streets. And then to keep alive on the streets, they fall into addiction. Some of these guys you speak to, they weren't addicts when they came here, but then falling into addiction to keep themselves warm or to keep themselves away from their problems. And hence drugs and alcohol has played a big part in that. Hence these guys are now on the streets. And when we talk to some of these guys, they say, we want to go back, but we can't go back because we've lost our passports, we've lost our immigration paperwork. And to prove to obviously the authorities that they're from India, that requires almost a whole year process to get the paperwork back from there to here, you have to get verified. And through that year or two, they're on the streets. They can't go back, and they can't get no funding here either. So they're literally stuck. No adar joge, as they say in Punjabi.
When we started this seva last year, it was around about this time last year, and some of the when the homeless Veers started coming and sleeping there, can you just explain to the audience the kind of illnesses, physical illnesses that they were coming in with?
I think this
exposure.
The saving grace for this year is that actually the seva started before the actual cold kicked in. Last year the seva started towards the end of December, January. So the guys who came, the main thing they were suffering was things such as frostbite. You know, they had blue feet, blue hands.
I remember that, yeah.
And you can imagine that is severely painful in its own right. And you know, not only that, you know, there were people obviously sleeping, you know, on the streets. There had people who actually had animal bites on their feet as well, on their legs. So they required antibiotics. So there was a lot of those kind of physical pains and everything.
There were radiator burns. I remember people when they'd go to hot places.
They would just hug the radiator, go to sleep, and then they wake up with
severe radiator burns. First time, and these are things I'd never ever experienced before. I hadn't seen. We hadn't seen
TB, wasn't it?
Well, there were some extreme cases as well.
We had some extreme cases, yeah.
But I mean, those kind of things, which can quite happen to us. I mean, you know, we're attached to seeing the radiator, but certainly we take it for granted. And these are people who, out of the sheer cold, see a radiator, go so close to the radiator and don't realize they're burning themselves by exposing themselves to that radiator and touching the radiator. And I'd never seen radiator burns in my life. We'd never seen such severe frostbite. And animal bites, rat bites or dog bites, cat bites, we don't know what they were, but they were bites for people sleeping on the streets and being attacked by wild animals, foxes. We don't know what they were attacked by.
Out of their heads.
So this is just happening on our doorstep. This is, you know, our doorstep in Ilford.
I think just one more point, we've touched on it already, but you know, these individuals are subject to exploitation. You know, they've gone through, you know, even we know that there's a lot of our, you know, a lot of community who are here illegally, and you know, there are a lot of businesses out there who would exploit them. That's why these people are basically on the street, where they've worked with somebody for they don't get paid regular. And you know, they haven't then got any money to survive. Then they
don't forget how they've
come
come here as well. They've been exploited to come here as well. They've paid through the odds to get here. You know, they've paid like you know, 10 lakh, you know, rupee.
And they've sold land. They've given everything up in order to come here. To them, it's do or die, basically. Then, isn't it? So in order
and we did have deaths last year.
Well, I mean, we
did have a death as well.
Yeah, we did. I mean, it was very sad that, you know.
It was quite an older gentleman.
The thing is, I mean, what we identified, while these people are on the move on the streets, they just carry on. They carry on going. Once you give them a comfortable environment, they actually fall ill by that time, because their body stops, relaxes, and then the illnesses come in, the kidneys back up, something. The liver gives in or something. Yeah, exactly.
So, we were doing the seva.
So,
again, it's a prime example. Look, you know, there is a need of the seva. Now, if the Guruji was here in physical form, do you think they would look and reject this, not look at it as a problem and not deal with it? Of course they would. And I think we become complacent. Because like you said earlier, we think seva is a direct debit, £5 a month there, £2 a month
somebody else's problem.
And someone else can deal with it on a physical level.
Which we're not undermining as well. I don't want to undermine that, because I want to make it clear that
is needed as well.
The sun stars out there, such as Kal Said, SOPW, Seva 84, United Sikhs are doing an amazing job, and they need our support, so those direct debits are a must still.
But they also need our voluntary support.
They need volunteers as well.
You know, that's the point we're trying to highlight. It's not, we don't want, obviously money is there, but it's about volunteers as well.
I worked for a charity for 7 years. I was doing consultancy work for them, and what I realised was, when it started off, it had a very clear vision, but as time gone on, that charity almost lost it lost where it was going, almost. Like, he was really helping, and the money they were getting from the grants from the governments, because they had to bid every year for particular grants, that money was then more spent on PDAs and spent more on lavish IT equipment. And I think what's the crucial part is that you need to keep focus on what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, that set aside, I mean, we're running out of time, unfortunately.
If I can just highlight one thing, I mean, let's just highlight what the Seva of the East London Sangat are doing towards this shelter. I mean, like Magan Singh, yourself, we're here, you know, in front of the cameras, but you know, there's a number of local guys who are staying the night time. You know,
we've got local Sevadars who have taken time out. The gym boys and the Sangat members are taking time out every night. They're sleeping in the gym with the guys to make sure they just
to explain, we've made a makeshift shelter in the gym of Gurdwara, which houses up to 30 sleepers. So there's 30 sleepers. At the moment, our numbers are not as much as that, but as the winter goes on, we expect more of them to start coming forward. I think one of the biggest taboos of this seva is the fact that people say, what about the alcohol issue and what about the drug issue? And it's to re-emphasize to the Sangat that we are controlling that issue, and we're working towards those, alleviating them of those addictions. But yeah, it is a gurukar, and we do have to operate a zero tolerance to alcohol and
to the point we've got a breathalyzer.
Yeah,
and we give a one chance policy as well. So if somebody is just below the limit, we do give them, and then obviously if they come, then they obviously better. So the idea is to give them the opportunity. Look, we want to push you. We want you to better yourself, and we are going to provide. We have been providing with them people to come and talk to them about addictions as well, which we're having as well. But I think you touched on a very good point that in your local areas, where we are, there is a lot of help that's needed for you to get involved in on a humanitarian level. And as Sikhs, we're not coming forward and doing that. And if you look at the Gurus, that's the first thing they did. And then from that, everything else grew. Be it political, be it comments, whatever. Everything grew from that one concept. And if we don't help these guys, who's going to help them?
Yeah.
If we ain't going to help our own, we can't help anybody.
It's all coming back to that oneness in here of a Kalpurk. We're all part of that oneness.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to understand. We said humanity impartial to all. So everyone has the right to that support. And if you're in a position to be able to give support, then certainly you should give support. What I want to emphasize is that over the last year, we definitely from the Seva, it built us up, it built our characters up as individuals. And certainly the Sevadas that are getting involved in this year, they're getting an immense amount of humbleness or maybe of what
issues are out
what
there,
human issues really are. So we're thankful to the committee of Singh Sabha Londonese for supporting us with this project, and we're thankful to the Sangat who for bearing with us as well and